I was making sure to set the stage properly, Bob.
Yeah, okay. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay. Should I wait to share my screen, or should I?
We have like half a minute until
okay, that's cool.
Until the due. So
I realized the background was mirrored, so I flipped it around. Oh, it's okay now. You can read it. Cool. And you guys are tracking any questions that come up, right?
yes.
Okay, that's great. Cool.
Okay, ready to go?
Okay. I'm ready to go.
Stage is yours.
All right, thanks. Okay, hi guys. I first thank you guys for coming to this session, and also a special thanks to the organizers of this event. Awesome job you guys are doing. I'm going to share my screen real quick. I'm going to share the whole desktop because oh, sorry, I've got a systems preferences thing. So moving back. Let's try that again. Okay. Can you see my screen okay? Double check that you can see the PowerPoint presentation.
It's loading.
It's loading. Tell me when you can see it.
Yep, you're on.
Okay, great. Okay, good. We got the technical difficulties out the way early on, which is always an issue when we're running online training and coaching engagement. So this is not new. COVID-19. So we've heard from a lot of the other speakers yesterday and today on some of the issues with the implications of the pandemic of COVID-19. They're not all bad. There's some surprising truths that have emerged in working with distributed teams, and the implication of this for what some are calling the next normal. Firstly, though, the boasting side, the boasting slide of many acronyms. Let me introduce myself. I'm Bob Willis. I'm an Enterprise Agile Coach in IBM's European Agile Center of Competency. I'm based in the UK, so don't know. We might have to change that name after Brexit. We'll see how that goes. But I work with organizations and teams and individuals worldwide to help them generate awesome outcomes. So great teams. Pre-COVID, it was all great, right? Everything was wonderful. We had fully cross-functional teams. We were co-located. We were delivering potentially shippable product at the end of every sprint. Well, for some, I mean, we heard from Ari earlier that is kind of a rare situation where all the stars line up and you have consistent, great delivery. And organizations and teams and individuals will always need support to succeed with their agile transformations. And as an agile coach, thank goodness for that. But now, kind of pre-COVID, we had the need for distributing teams due to mergers and acquisitions, for example, market consolidation, geographical expansion, or even just good old offshoring to take advantage of competitive labor markets. However, distributed delivery was always the poor cousin of face-to-face co-located working. indeed, when we did employ offshoring or nearshoring resourcing strategies, it was thought that the preference is to distribute a whole team rather than have individuals within teams. Distribute the whole team, at least you're co-located somewhere, right? So that was our preference. But now we're kind of forced into doing this. So let's just see what you guys think. I've got a Mentimeter here. If you go to menti.com and put in the code, we'll see. I'm going to switch over to Mentimeter and let's see what you guys think. Enter the code and choose between whether your organizations and teams are all co-located, whether they're co-located but you've got maybe some whole teams offshore, co-located with individuals dispersed geographically, so you're dispersing the team members themselves, or if you've got everything remote, all your teams and individuals remote. All right, we're seeing some results here. Okay, we'll give it a couple more seconds. All right, we've got from 13, 14 responses so far. Almost half of you guys were co-located with whole teams offshore. So you were essentially having the best that you could be at that time, I think. So, we really value the co-location part of working together with Agile teams. Switching back to our PowerPoint here. This, I thought it would be interesting, just for fun. I looked at all of the sessions that the presenters were doing from yesterday and today, and I picked out some words from the summary of their talks using a very scientific method, of course, but I think it's kind of telling in a way that those words were there at all, and some of the ones are repeated more than once. Just from Jenny's talk just now, intent came up several times, along with trust and communication. So these things. So thank you guys for kind of informing my agenda. That was great. But we're going to be talking and kind of reinforcing about the things that you've heard from some of the other talks and kind of bringing it all together. So again, we've got a focus on leadership, a focus on reevaluating and rethinking the situations that we find ourselves in, and culture. The culture word is really supportive of all our efforts during this kind of disruptive time that's going to help us and our teams and our organizations and our leaders to actually succeed in a virtual way. So it's kind of all change. It's kind of enter COVID-19 stage left, and organizations now have to get their head around enforced disruptive change. COVID is a forcing function that has, as we've heard from some of the other speakers, ignited almost a reordering of priorities for leaders to pursue transformation to agile ways of working, what we all want, except for them maybe a bit quicker than they had anticipated. But it's surprising, isn't it, what you can do when you have this forcing function, this burning platform where you have to act. It's a bit of a shock to the system, and some leaders are uncomfortable leading remote teams, should we say. They're having to challenge their long-held beliefs on productivity and efficiency, and they need to focus on what truly matters, which is the people. But they're struggling. They're struggling to lead employees that are out of sight, and they knee-jerk default to the comfort, if you like, of micromanagement, tracking hours and activities. You just have to look at maybe the change in the way people are using some of the tools, such as Jira, where they're now saying, right, we want you to put your actual hours against these tasks. We didn't do it before. We're just going to do it now so we can see a pretty burn up and burn up of hours and burn down of tasks. So subtle things like that are not helping. And some of the other speakers have mentioned policies and procedures that are getting in the way of you guys doing your jobs as effectively as possible virtually. And the rule book needs to be thrown out of the window. You have to rethink as far as policies and procedures, yes, but also tooling, the draconian approval cycles to get the things that you need to do your job effectively. Yes, I mean, there's been increased cyber threat occurrence since COVID hit. So yes, you have to balance security against productivity and the frustration of your employees if they're forced to use a particular tool because it takes 6 months to go through an approval cycle for use, which we've all come across. Some statistics for you. An IBM Institute of Business Value, so IBV report, quite a recent one, stated that 75% of executives say that they're helping their employees to work in new ways, but only 38% of those employees feel organizations are giving them the remote working support that they need. So there's a bit of a discrepancy there between what leaders are thinking they're doing and what is actually true on the ground. And some of them have gone down the empowerment route. That has its own inherent issues. It takes me to empower you, as David Marquet points out in his book, Turn the Ship Around. It's a great read. And indeed, I remember kind of being fondly attached to a Dilbert cartoon where the story goes that all the employees were forced to wear an I'm empowered badge, which subtle, but I like that joke. So the biggest problem really with this line of reasoning is that it involves controlling behavior, and controlling behavior is directly related to a lack of trust. And trust at its core, you have to have a need for willingness to exhibit vulnerability. And Jenny brought that up on her talk earlier. Where there is no vulnerability, there is no trust. It is a kind of straight line there. You have to be vulnerable in order to gain the trust of your teams as leaders and within teams to build hyper-performing teams. That has to be in place. And trust influences behaviors in the right direction. And those behaviors in turn produce awesome outcomes that lead to measurable performance. So it's a kind of step-by-step thing It's kind of almost a mini value stream in our delivery mechanism as a team. And it's a team. It's the unit of work is not the individual person. The unit of work is the team. And that team focus is really built up through having a strong basis of trust. And if we look at Patrick Lencioni's 5 dysfunctions of a team, trust down the bottom there is the foundation on which all else is built. So it is absolutely key, and many of the speakers have referred to this during their talks. So we would like to see what you think of your organizations. Again, go to menti.com with the same code. I like this definition, and I was doing research for this, definition from the Academy of Management Review on what is, in their view, trust. A psychological state comprising the intention to accept vulnerability based upon positive expectations of the intentions or behavior of another. Lot of words, but I think it's quite a good definition in that you're really having an intent to accept vulnerability. And that, I think, is key, but fostering that intent is difficult. Let me flip over to the results oh, wait a minute. I have to go to the next one. Here we go, sorry. So where is your organization using the same code? Based on your opinion of whether your organization breeds an environment of high trust. So if you strongly agree, you're over this side. If you strongly disagree, you're on the left-hand side. And so you're able now to, we're seeing some, so we're about 2/3 the way across currently, kind of vacillating between about 50-50 and about 2/3. We've got 13 responders so far. I'm going to leave it a little longer because this is quite interesting. As to whether you have real true trust, not just necessarily within your team, but within the broader organization, that you're able to actually feel that you can take risks. Okay, so we've got 13 responders. We're about just over halfway on where your organizations think they are in terms of high trust. And I think those organizations that are thriving in these kind of COVID times, they were probably already based on a culture of high trust. They have a real sense of purpose and a shared vision and all that good stuff that permeates throughout the organization. And unsurprisingly, a lot of these organizations had already embraced agile ways of working. Some of these organizations may have used the technique that supposedly was introduced by Hewlett-Packard, as mentioned in Search of Excellence, called management by walking around, MBWA, if you'd like an acronym. And this model of engagement with employees is touted for virtualization, in that it was great that managers would, get out of their ivory towers. They would go and be with the teams. They would understand their concerns. And in organizations in Japan, so in particular Toyota, they would call this a Gemba walk. However, it didn't happen very often, in that managers really didn't engage as much as they could do with their workforce. This virtualization of management by walking around, though, is kind of, these managers are kind of being encouraged to do this virtually. So they may not have been walking around at all, and hence a bit lacking on the engagement front. They're finding themselves kind of coaxed to be doing this in a virtual way, whether that be via chat or via Slack or via phone calls or video chat. There's an encouragement, subtle encouragement there, which is, it's a good thing. So that is one advantage there that's maybe pushing some managers who are uncomfortable with doing this in a physical sense to do it in a virtual environment. And again, back to David Marquette, the forward to this book is quite interesting in that it was written by Stephen Covey, and it's got, in my opinion, it's a really great definition of what leadership is. It's communicating to people their worth and potential so clearly that they're inspired to see it in themselves. And we really need to focus on ways in a distributed, remote environment of making sure our employees know we value them and they know that we value the work that they're doing. And it's not just our leadership teams that need to do this, it's our peer relationships. We need to enforce each other. In this book, David Marquet is espousing the leader-leader model rather than the more traditional leader-follower model where you have this larger-than-life chief executive that is inspiring the workforce, but then they move on and you're left with a new environment. With leader-leader, everyone is a leader. True empowerment occurs when you have this kind of peer leadership model. And as far as the agile ways of working goes, in order to be effective at delivery, and as Ari mentioned earlier, we need to reduce delays, which more often than not comes down to shortening decision latency, the time between when a decision has been raised, or that the need for a decision has been raised, an impediment has been raised, to us getting the answer that's going to inform how we move forward with delivery. We do not want to be, as agile teams, dead in the water, waiting for weeks sometimes for input on a key decision that needs to be made for us to move forward effectively. And that essentially decision making needs to be decentralized where possible to where the information on making that decision resides. So think about that. It is essentially all about the people, and we're valuing our people's skills and expertise so that based on trust, we can let them figure it out, set the objective, let those guys figure it out. If we look at the world of DevOps, bringing development and operations and all the other bits, security, compliance, bringing all that together so that as one big team of teams, we can get over the line and deliver to the market so we can get feedback, because feedback is king. And we shorten those cycles, those feedback cycles, we will get information as to whether we're going in the right direction or we have to pivot and do something else. And decision making is key to that. Putting the decisions and the power to do what is best can reside within your teams. Agile Manifesto, 20 years young next year, I believe. Kind of right now, we've got almost the 25th anniversary of Scrum, but Agile Manifesto, sixth principle of the Agile Manifesto is that the most efficient and effective method of conveying information to and within a development team is face-to-face conversation. We all know this, but COVID hit, and essentially we believe it to be true, but we need to find ways to almost better virtualize face-to-face. Technology can support this, but it's not all about technology. Good ways of working and collaborating need to be instilled first. And virtual team building is not easy. Not so bad for teams that were together pre-COVID, had some physical interaction, even with distributed teams. We would try and bring at least some representatives from those offshore teams onshore, build up a relationship, understand ways of working, and then they would go back offshore and kind of disseminate that amongst the distributed teams. So we had that, which was not a bad model. But for COVID nascent teams that were bought in and were brought together after COVID hit, they're missing any kind of possibility of physical team building, which is a lot of fun, right? So a real concerted effort must be placed on getting these teams to form team identity, to build cohesion within the team, even though you're distributed geographically, but as a kind of virtual team mentality and mindset, building cohesion and establishing trust. And we've come back to the T word again, trust. Lisette yesterday said that trust is the critical glue that binds the team together. I love that. So thank you, Lisette, and I couldn't agree more. And for Google, Google's Project Aristotle, in search of great teams, what makes great teams, up the very top there, kind of leading all the other items, is psychological safety. And other speakers have mentioned this as well. But when Google, were performing this research, they were analyzing what makes a great team in Project Aristotle. Psychological safety was of paramount importance in order to exhibit that much needed vulnerability, to have a safe place to take risks, to be heard. Yeah, so you have a safe environment within your teams where you have a voice. And you think, well, that's great. That's all wonderful and dandy, but right now I'm kind of more worried about my physical safety than psychological safety. Thank you very much. Strange thing has happened. This physical lack of safety has led to almost a shared fear. And this is almost a commonality where people are remotely being a bit more open and intimate because they've got this shared experience that we're all going to, and they're able to maybe voice what they're thinking, what they're worried about, what they're concerned about. And this in and of itself can lead to sowing the seeds of psychological safety and fostering an environment, yes, a virtual one, but an environment ripe for innovation and collaboration. Who knew, right? Other surprising phenomena, what I would call interactivity leveling. It's a strange phenomenon. There appears to be some leveling within our team members based on their personality. So more introverted team members I have seen be more willing to collaborate through the use of tools, and hence they get their voice heard that way, where maybe if the team wasn't that strong, didn't have a good social contract, didn't listen, didn't necessarily encourage a voice for all, we're getting almost unexpected tools leading the ability to put psychological safety in place and encouragement as well. So if you don't have it, I'm not saying get a tool and you'll get it. What I am saying is it might encourage a more kind of smoothing behavior within teams, or extroverted people within your teams might be kind of tempered their natural inclinations, and will, through this transparency of collaboration and video calling, that we'll see maybe almost a masking of some of the bad behaviors that we potentially have seen on projects with senior tech guys not necessarily listening to the more junior people, a more encouragement for collaboration, collaborative work, and pairing. So there's kind of no hiding behind a suit and tie in these times. The content of your narrative is much, much more important. We do need to make sure, however, that we focus on engagement in our teams in these uncertain times. Uncertainty breeds stress. And we don't want our team members to suffer issues relating to their mental health and well-being. It's difficult, though. It's difficult to recognize this when we're interacting with people remotely. And it's tricky to tune in to the emotions of others. When we're using tools such as Zoom, WebEx, Google Meet, whichever is your flavor, especially if our bandwidth, I live in a very rural location, especially if our bandwidth is so starved that we have to shut off our cameras. And then we've lost the opportunity to see the reactions of people to the things that we're saying and doing. We've noticed this. I run a lot of remote training courses, and we cannot have, because of the tools we're using and the bandwidth of people at home, we can't have their cameras on, which makes it very difficult to judge engagement of the people that you're training. Are they understanding the concepts that you're putting across? So a real focus on collaborative tools to encourage that engagement with the people you're training. If you're using Mural, or if you're using Miro, or some of those tools, they're excellent at actually simulating the kind of interactivity, the kind of experiential learning that we had when we were in a physical classroom. So for as far as training goes, we need to really put an emphasis on that. But as far as teams go, we have to use these techniques to increase our shared responsibility and accountability within those teams. And in order to do that, I find the work of Jim and Michelle McCarthy and Richard Kasparowski on core protocols to be very useful, engaging how our teams are doing and enabling them to share their feelings, their intentions, and their commitment to engagement. And the simplest, this is a poster from Richard Kasparowski here on, maybe in which kind of focus, which kind of lens you're looking through, which particular ones of these core protocols you might consider using. And these are freely available. I've put the URL at the bottom of the screen here. And you don't have to use all of them. But just to go back to the training example, we find that the check-in and check-out protocols that other trainers have mentioned are very useful because they're indicating that you're checked in, you're bought into working effectively within your team, whether that be a development team or within the team that you're a cohort as part of a training course. You're checked into working effectively with your teammates according to a set of core principles or a social contract. We have a social contract for training as well. And when you find you need to be elsewhere, physically or emotionally, then you can check out and people know where you're at. And the use of these protocols within teams, yes, it's very structured. And some people will say, well, isn't that a little bit robotic? Well, maybe, but it's kind of a forcing function again, in that we need some kind of structure when we're in virtual environments that is going to encourage our teams to do things that they may have done automatically when they were kind of in a physical realm. So yeah, with training, when we do this, there's a subtle pressure for attendees to focus on the training and not be checking their Facebook account. I can see you doing that there. To really augment this, teams need to do stuff that's not work-based as well. And we've heard some ideas from other speakers on that as well. But it's key. You have to be able to socialize with your teammates. We've had virtual happy hours with some of our colleagues, just to build up that relationship part of this, which is going to support us when we're working together. So let's take a look at some of the implications of all of this. Another Institute for Business Value study found, survey says, global executives currently in the field indicate they expect to have 2.5 times more remote workers 2 years from now than they had prior to COVID-19. And I've put the reference down the bottom there. So we need to look very carefully at our organization's forward-looking resiliency. Yeah, a period of reflection, rebuilding will occur, but the values, the practices, the principles that we've kind of had to put in place or have learned or have developed since COVID hit, kind of like short-term memory being cemented in long-term memory, these will be embedded in what people are calling the next normal. Organizations will become compassionate organizations, and they will emerge stronger than ever. And agile ways of working will be more likely to spread throughout the organization rather than existing in an agile bubble. So this crisis has generated a renewed focus on culture and on mindset, and those organizations that truly embrace this will reap the rewards. I love this quote from Peter Drucker: "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." Thank you. I will stop sharing. Any questions?
Thank you, Bob. Yes, of course, there are a few questions. Before we go into those, I specifically wrote down one particular phrase you mentioned. I really loved it. It's delays are caused by decision latency. I love that. I mean, I think I haven't heard this comparison before. Nice.
Thank you.
Yeah. And what's your, like, you spoke more about of the generic situation in your work environment. What is your really biggest personal discovery since the moment COVID hit?
Personal discovery. I think that, well, firstly, I discovered that I have really crap broadband that I kind of had a clue I did, but from an intrinsic point of view, I found I really needed to focus on my own health. I think, as Lisette was saying yesterday, you really need to say, right, it's very difficult mixing a work environment with a home environment. You've got dogs barking, kids, wanting food, but to be able to step outside, get a breath of fresh air, have a walk, take the dog for a walk. I'm kind of doing more of that now to kind of help my own performance at work than I was before. So maybe that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I also remember Mary, if you listen to her speech yesterday, she was also mentioning that it was a great opportunity for us to really discover who my colleagues really are. Like, they have kids, they have dogs, they have some other animals. Yeah, nice. The other few questions we have also from participants. One of those is, any tips on increasing engagement? You spoke a lot about engagement, but maybe in a nutshell, any tips to increase engagement in a virtual meeting?
In a virtual meeting, well, I mean, if we're talking a meeting, or if we're talking a training environment or a coaching environment, probably applies to all of them. But really, kind of as I mentioned, the use of collaborative tools to get people really involved, not just seeing a webcam, is kind of key. One other thing that I like to do is actually mail people stuff, so that they have things that, that thing I sent you in the post, and then, here it is through training. Yeah, we actually send them some things that they need to do manually to get that actual engagement. The way they used to do things is kind of key as well. So collaborative tools and physical stuff, if you can manage it, I find very useful. Gaining feedback, and as you said, finding out stuff about these guys that we didn't know before. So we have, for example, when we run training, a mural page with a fireplace, a kind of GIF, a moving GIF of a fireplace with all people's photos around it, and we will do a check-in around that fireplace, and we'll understand, some surprising fact that you guys might have that we don't know about.
Great, thank you for sharing these tips. The other question is, what about yourself or your team productivity during the pandemic? Were there any impact there in that area?
I think probably, like everybody, yes. We were already working in this way, though. Myself as a coach and a trainer, we combine physical coaching with follow-up remote coaching anyway. So the kind of tools and kind of methods were in place already. Those were augmented, and some of the things that I was missing and that I've needed for years, suddenly, we're able to get those things. The red tape has been cut, and we're able to do that. But as far as productivity goes, I think now I've kind of, like most people, gotten into a groove of, right, this is how it works. I'm able to separate the work from the home. And that is key, really, just finding your feet in what works for you, because it's going to be different for everybody, I think.
Okay, thank you very much. We had Bob.
You're welcome.
It was a pleasure to host you here.